Coming up on this show, we're going to get a look inside the 2020 Dakar winning team at Honda and see what it takes to win this gruelling event. Then I'm going to spend some time on the road and on the track with the new Catty Street Fighter V4S. But first, Chad's been sunning it up in California on the new Arch Motorcycles KR GT1.
Welcome to LA, welcome to California, and we're here with Arch to test their new KR GT1, which is all new for 2020. So there's 20 major design changes and 150 component changes for the bike for 2020. Some of those changes have been done for Euro 4. For example, the rear mudguard is slightly higher to give more space. And the different upgrades is with suspension, the steering. We've been out all day today testing. So we've done just over 100 miles, which was a mixture of freeway, town work, city work, and then up in the mountains. And when you come to ride a bike like this, you kind of have expectations and you kind of go, okay, it's going to be a big cruiser, we're going to be in America, it's going to be a bit soft, the ground clearance is going to be a bit rubbish and the brakes aren't going to be as strong as they say they are. But it's completely not what I was expecting. As soon as we left here, you could feel that the suspension was really, really taut. The suspension is very sporty, it's very agile, the power is incredible, it's over a 2-litre capacity, and the brakes are really strong. As soon as we got on the freeway, cruising at 75, 80 miles an hour, 3,000 RPM, very little vibration, sounds great, looks cool, turning heads, everybody in the car's checking you out. And then we got up into the mountains, I was like, okay, it's probably not going to handle as well as expected. But the initial turn-in is a little slow, it's very planted and stable, it's not twitchy. And then once you get it on its side, you just keep leaning, and then you lean a little bit more, and then you lean a little bit more. You know, we're not dragging pegs, we're not dragging exhaust, it just keeps leaning over and leaning over. But what's really impressive is the transition from left to right. So it'll roll, you get this like beautiful like roll from left to right, then into another corner from right to left, and it's just a toy with. For such a big bike, it really does turn. You're not kind of raising it over the suspension and then it doesn't sit on the shock and then vice versa and vice versa. It's just nice and planted, nice and rolling. If you really rev the big engine, yeah, it's got loads of power, but after around 4,000 RPM, you really don't need to. Just stay between 2,500 and 3,500 RPM. Massive torque, massive power. Noise-wise, sounds really good, but it's not overly loud. It's not scaring animals and making people be frightened. There's a nice pop on the overrun, but if you want to just cruise around town, it's nice and nimble, nice and quiet. But then when you do give it a big handful, it just reminds you that this is over 2-litre in capacity. The machine work on it and the billet work on it is just beautiful. You can take parts of this bike off and put it on your mantelpiece at home. Get rid of the TV, just put one of these in front. So yesterday we got to ride the new Arch motorcycle. Today we've come down to the factory to see how the bikes are built, to see how they're put together, to see the CNC machining and to see the design process. Let's go inside and have a good look. So we're inside the factory here at Arch, and what makes these bikes so unique is everything is built and done here in-house with meticulous detail. A huge amount of aluminium CNC machining. So this is the fuel tank. So you've got the right-hand side and the left-hand side fuel tank. These are both connected, so if you feel the right feels the left and the left feels the right. But just to produce this tank, this is obviously very rough, it's 15 hours per side on the machining. So that's 30 hours just to produce the fuel tanks. Then they've got to be welded with the back plate. And as you can tell, this welding is all done by hand, because each weld is slightly different. So this is not a machine that's done this is a guy here in the workshop. Then once this is being welded and put together, it then has to be finished, it then has to be painted. So you're looking at around 50 to 60 hours just to produce the fuel tanks. And this is repeated throughout the bike. You just pick any section of the bike, and again, it's CNC machined, it's been done by hand, and it's not machined and then put on a shelf and left covered in dust. They're producing around 7 to 12 items each time. So here in the factory, there is only 5 or 6 of these fuel tanks ready to go. And then when the order comes through, they will make more fuel tanks. It's just a beautiful work of art. I mean, you could have that fuel tank on in your front living room as a display. It's just a beautiful bit of work. But then you can see where the hours and the painstaking time has gone in. Because obviously this was designed before it was made. The machining was done. The tooling was done. The CAD design was done. So it's 50 hours to produce a fuel tank. But before that, there's months and months of design and prep work. So believe it or not, this is a swinging arm. Well, the right-hand side section of a swinging arm. So we take the huge big block, this goes in the CNC machine, and after many, many, many hours, we kind of get this level, which as you can see is starting to develop as the side of the swinging arm. And then carefully, finally, we go from there to here, and then this section here is what has come out of this giant block. Now, produce each bike here in the workshop, we're looking at around 1,200 pounds of aluminium. So each section of this swinging arm where it's welded started off as a huge block like that. Then it's in the CNC machine, which can be anywhere from 1 or 2 hours for some parts to up to 15 hours for other items. And then it's beautifully hand welded together. There's a beautiful finish. And then we end up with the final swinging arm, which this is the new swinging arm, which with improved rigidity over the previous model. And it's the attention to detail again, like the beautiful finish here with the slight ribs, which is all deliberate. This is absolutely stunning. And again, from 1,200 pounds of aluminium that they use, they end up using around 200 pounds worth of actual aluminium that goes in the bike. So there's 1,000 pounds worth, as in weight, of aluminium that's recycled and comes back into the system. So this is the finished article, and I just wanted to pick out 1 or 2 little bits that I find intriguing. So for example, the levers. These are not just any old levers. You want one lever? That's $1,000. The calipers, huge 6-pot radials, $1,500 per side. The reservoirs have changed, so now you've got ABS. It's a Brembo one on the back. The dash, completely changed. Again, that's for Euro 4. This is much larger. The fuel tank has changed in shape. This isn't as aggressive as it was on the previous bike. So all these little changes and all these little bits of trinket. This is the highest end of custom bike building at its very best. So this is the final production model. It takes around 90 days to produce this bike from absolutely nothing to the finished bike. And if the parts are not already made, you're looking at around 4 months to make the parts, add everything together, and to produce the bike. The bikes are made here in LA. If you want to purchase one of the bikes, you can choose different seats. Everything can be bespoke to the way you want to ride and your setup and your weight and where you ride. You can come down to the factory, you can discuss with the guys, discuss what paint scheme you want, what kind of finish you want. It's all down to yourself as the end customer. But what a machine to have in front, and yeah, 90 days to go from, if all the parts are in stock, if everything is on the shelf, one guy, 90 days of work.
It's quite an accomplishment for America, for Honda, for the whole entire team.
Now, I spent some quality time with the new Ducati Street Fighter V4S, putting it through its paces both on the road and on the track. Check it out. This is the new Ducati Street Fighter V4S. It's the Panigale with the bodywork taken off and a road-friendly riding position. We first caught a glimpse of this bike when John was at the preview last year, but finally we've got one to swing a leg over and put it to the test. We took it out on track and for a spin on the roads to see if the new Street Fighter was the ultimate naked road bike. Now we couldn't test a 208 horsepower bike without getting onto the track at some point. We snuck out for a few low-key laps amongst a field full of race bikes to see how the Street Fighter V4S stands up against proper race machinery.
Okay, Brands Hatch. Let's get out on this new Street Fighter V4. See how she goes. In at the deep end for the old Ducati today. It's surrounded by race bikes. Is awesome. As you get her turned up, she has got some pace. It's funny, if you're used to riding Ducatis and you get a bit of a V-twin head on, you end up running this real low in the revs. And it's super smooth and super easy to ride, but you kind of wonder what all the fuss is about, and then you let it rev up to the red line and the thing absolutely rips away. Goes. First impressions, a much more upright riding position than previous Street Fighters, and definitely than I was expecting from a fast Ducati. But the engine is pure sports bike. Once you get that thing singing, it rips. But I've got to say, it is impeccably behaved on track here today. The proof is going to be in the road riding pudding, to labour a metaphor there. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see once we get this out on the road, just how well this track manner can translate into making a good road bike.
So Ducati's new Street Fighter V4S. This was, in their words, designed to be the naked version of the Panigale V4 that we rode earlier in the year at Bahrain. That thing was a ballistic missile of a bike, but used in their new electronic package, a very usable one. This Street Fighter has carried that same trend onto a really good road bike. So it carries the same technology as the Panigale, but with no fairing and wide handlebars. And of course they've tuned and changed things, but it doesn't change the fact that this has 208 horsepower and weighs a claimed 201 kilos ready to go on the road. That is phenomenal power to weight ratio, and in a bike this good, this much power has got to be controlled well. We took it out and had a proper good blast on the roads in some horrible conditions to see if it could be as good as it was on the track where we started our test.
That is awesome. One place where the Ducati isn't the perfect road bike, and that is when you do the U-turn. Doesn't have a superb steering lock. It's not terrible, but you definitely
feel like you run out of steam, like when you're trying to do tight, slow manoeuvres. Which I probably wouldn't have even commented on normally. But because the rest of it seems to be so good as a road bike, I started treating it as one, and wondering why it doesn't feel exactly like a CP500. In a good way, in a good way. So we've been cheated by the weather today. This was our sunny intervals ride, and instead we've had biblical downpour. And now the sun's out, but we've got slick, wet roads, still pretty cold. And once again I am just kind of surprised and in awe of this thing, of how easy it is to ride on the road.
So what does your 19,800 pounds get you? Well, gets you 208 horsepower. It gets you wings, that's pretty good. This S model comes with the Öhlins mechatronic suspension, so you get the electronic dynamic suspension, so it adjusts itself as you're riding along, keeps itself suited to whatever the road conditions throw at it. You get so many electronics, it'd be a 5-week-long video just to go through all of them. Some of the highlights that I think make the most difference on this bike, one are the wheelie control, traction control and slide control, particularly the wheelie control on the road. It sounds silly, but 208 horsepower wants to go up a lot. And when you put the wheelie control on, the thing's really stable, it's really planted. The fact that there are 8 levels of each of these controls means you can dial in exactly how much lift, exactly how much intervention you want, and get the bike to behave exactly as you want. Ducati Street Fighters have traditionally been quite hard-nosed bikes. They've always had what look like wide handlebars, but you get on them and they always feel like a set of clip-ons, even though they're a flat bar. That's the biggest thing that surprised me when I jumped on this. The handlebars were surprisingly high for a Ducati Street Fighter. The seat was pretty comfortable. In fact, the whole riding position was a position that, I don't want to say felt un-Ducati, but definitely didn't feel like the older, more aggressive Street Fighters I've ridden. That set the scene for this bike because we rode it in freezing cold mornings, drizzle, damp. I kind of got to a lot of real world testing on this, and all conditions, it really impressed me with just how easy it was to use. Then when the sun came out and we found some good roads, use the next half of the throttle travel, change out of street mode, go full power and sport mode, and the thing is an absolute missile, but never in an edgy, angry way, just in a making loads and loads of progress really, really fast. It never feels like it wants to kill you. It never feels like it wants to spit you off. It feels like it wants to get to wherever you're going in the shortest time possible. And that makes for a really fun and enjoyable road bike. Something that is no mean feat. Oh, imagine if you'd set your alarm and it went off halfway through recording. Oh, my pasty's ready. To make a 208 horsepower motorcycle enjoyable as opposed to simply intimidating, that's clever. And I gotta hand it to Ducati. They've done a fantastic job there. I got a chance to ride it on the track and on the road. We were on the Pirelli Rosso Corsa tyres, which is definitely a road-biased sports tyre. First session in the morning, cold. Didn't put my tyre warmers on, cold tyres, in a session absolutely packed full of race bikes. So it was everything from British Super Stocks to all the club races. They'd all turned up for a test day and I wobbled out on my cold tyres on me very much a road bike. I felt pretty intimidated, but within 5 laps, they were getting annoyed by how fast this thing was. For sure in that first session, I was definitely the rolling chicane in the middle of the turns while I got a feel for the tyres and the track, but you'd get onto the straights and just and you could see them sort of trying to pass you and looking across going, what the hell is that thing? Why is that red missile disappearing away from me? It was ballistically fast on track. At first I found the high bars a little bit weird to get used to, especially on a Ducati and especially having just ridden the Panigale. The bars kind of felt at odds with the performance of the bike. But 2 sessions in, didn't think about that anymore. Enjoyed being comfortable riding through the pits. On track, as you'd expect from a Ducati, not a fault in the performance. Tyres, if you were going to do more track days, I'd definitely go for a stickier tyre because this thing has the power to really use them. And these Rosso Corsas were starting to feel uncomfortable when you started to push on and use all of the 208,000 million horsepower that you had on tap. When we got off the track, I was really impressed with it. I didn't see how it could be as good a road bike as it was a track bike. And that's where the power delivery, the torque control, and the electronics proved me an idiot, made me look wrong. Because on the road, smooth power, torque from anywhere in the rev range, it's a sophisticated, enjoyable road bike. I've used all my superlatives up there. It is a fantastic bike. I got a couple of small criticisms, but they're like boring, nerdy criticisms. So first of all, there's not very much wind protection, so if you're riding in the rain, you get very wet. It's very disappointing. Old man Chris didn't like getting a wet chest. Oh, old man Chris didn't like doing U-turns on it either, because there's very little steering lock. Who cares? It's ballistically fast, has 208 horsepower, and wings. What's not to like about it? So when all's said and done, this is an incredible bike. It wants to be an incredible bike. For a track day short of £20,000, it needs to be incredible. It is. The performance is sublime. The electronics and control and the package that Ducati have put together here means that anyone can get on it and enjoy it. It's not just a bike for elite riders to enjoy and everyone else to be frightened of. That is the masterpiece of this bike. It's going to take a real good real world test to split this and the KTM Super Duke. Keep an eye out for an upcoming test on Bike World, where we're going to put these two quite different but both incredible in their own way bikes to the test on road, on track, and anywhere else we decide to take them, and see which one we'd pick as our favourite road bike for 2020.